I love what you're saying, and it's causing all these thoughts to come up for me.
Great. I love this. One thing that I want, this is just, we're going to talk about the relationship that we have with God on Thursday. One thing that I want to offer is that so many of us, when we are praying and we want God to answer our prayers, we forget that God is not a God of force. Can he make people act differently? Sure, if he wanted to, but that's not his purpose. If he wanted to make everybody on the earth be 100% perfect, he would do that. But that's not the point. So notice when we pray, and I am as guilty as all of us for doing this. And I'm like, God, if you could just make my husband stop doing what he's doing, that would be great, right? And I know he can, but I also know that he won't. So notice, ladies, when you continue to pray for what you know God won't do, he's not going to force anyone to change. He says, I'm here and I've saved you if you want to be saved. I'm here and I've conquered that if you want to give it to me. But he's never going to force anybody to give it to him. Does this make sense? And so often, as I've reflected on this, I have realized that so often I have prayed for him to change other people or change circumstances so that I don't have to feel how I feel, right? And it's totally uncomfortable, and it's okay to pray for that. And I'm not saying that he can't like the scriptures talk us about like how he like can soften hearts, but he can't actually, he's not going, he can. He's not going to force people to change. So maybe you do find yourself in a situation that you never saw coming, but it doesn't mean that it's God's fault. Okay. And often I think we're so quick to give him the fault, to give him the blame, and yet we never give him the credit. Like in the reverse, we're never going to say, oh my gosh, my husband, like if our husbands were never addicted to porn, we weren't going to be like, oh my gosh, I give God so much credit. He made sure that my husband wasn't addicted to porn. Right? And yet we blame God when it doesn't get taken away from him. We're like, God, you can take it away. Why aren't you? And that's one of the biggest questions. He's not going to. And it's actually the biggest blessing because that is what enables us to choose him. And that's what he wants. He wants us to choose it. He wants us to choose him. He's not going to take away our choice. He is a big believer in freedom, ladies. That's why he and I get along so well, because that is my favorite value. Okay. It's freedom. It calls to me and I was born that way. All right. It is in my soul somehow. And that's what calls me to God, is because he is such a big believer in freedom as well. He wants each one of you to have freedom, but not just you, all your people, all the people in your life. And sometimes the freedom that other people get causes us to be affected. And we don't like that. We want God to take it away. But God has also given us the tools, which you guys have all found, on what to do when we are affected. Maybe he doesn't take away the circumstance, but he always makes a way through. We just have to be willing to take a look and go for it, because our brain wants him to take it away. It's one of the reasons why our brain likes it, is this idea that God could take it away, and why didn't he? Is because it's easier. If you think about that motivational triad, our brain wants to do the least amount of work. It is a lot easier for God to just make sure your husband never looks at porn again than it is for us to actually have to go through all the healing and all the trauma and all the processing of the emotions and manage the brain and all of that stuff. It is so much easier if he would just take that away. That would be so much nicer. That would be so much easier. And that's what our brain thinks. And it would be. But he's not going to do that. But even though he's not going to take away that circumstance, he will lead a way through. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not going to soften the heart of your spouse, or maybe not bring them the right person that says something at the right time, but your spouse still has to be receptive, right? Your spouse still has to be open enough, and that's their choice. Does that make sense? Gina, I wish my daughters could have heard you just now. They gave up their faith because of circumstances. I'm going to replay this until I can have it glued in my